Listen, learn, and lead. Neither the life of an individual nor the history of a society can be understood without understanding both. This is a quote by C. Wright Mills. The subject of racial injustice is and means different things to all of us. We may have been and could possibly still be victims, villains, or mere observers, but hopefully not spectators. What this quote says to me is that understanding the past is indeed an important step towards actionable change. However, it's not enough. We all need to listen, learn, and lead. It reminds me of the climate change subject when it was first highlighted a few decades ago. As such a huge and wide topic, many of us were at a loss of where we fit. Will planting a tree or conserving energy make any difference in global temperature and its effect on ecosystems? Will how I handle or manage waste in my spheres of operation move the needle? The obscurity of climate as a concept, let alone climate change, is hard enough to grasp. What about the actions of billions of human beings reading from different scripts and experiencing it in different shapes, forms, and magnitude, but somehow all contributing to the impact on everyone? That notwithstanding, the world has found ways of breaking down a complex issue and either adapting or mitigating against it. Everyone has had to do something less of something, or do something differently in order to play their part in combating the negative effects of climate change. And although we're still a long way from reversing the effects, if ever, somehow, even without anyone watching, more people are trying to do the right thing. Racial injustice is no different. Just like climate change and gender inequality, it is a human construct and has affected the global coffee sector from time immemorial. Like gender inequality, there exists a huge element of power play in spite of interdependence in the same sector. Just the same way the sector has made concerted efforts to rise above negative effects of climate change and gender inequality, it is never too late to tackle racial injustice directly and at every possible opportunity. As an association and as we make coffee better, we should be thinking critically about our actions, inactions, and how we relate with all stakeholders. In other words, listen, learn, and lead. Racial injustices do not have to cause or bring about street protests, but if and when they do, like they have in the recent past, it forces the world to look critically at the part they may have played by implication, entertainment, or actual commission. Luckily for us in the coffee sector, signs of distress are glaring, and therefore this presents us with a starting point to try and remedy the effects and impact of racial injustices. From the ongoing coffee price crisis, declining quality, lack of conviviality among sector players, and scariest of all, the thought of the world running out of coffee. Now, I'm sure none of us would wish to see this happen. This brings me to the point of international coffee exchanges. The global sea coffee market should be governed by economic forces of supply and demand. But is it? A closer but summarized look at this historical tool reveals, in mine and many others' opinions, why we find ourselves in the current price crisis. Is the market controlled by any other forces, hence the issue of non-scientific discounts and differentials? Would it be useful to have local exchanges from producing countries take part in setting the base price of their coffee, and not only the NYC and the London markets? Isn't coffee quality the main determinant of high or low prices? Because for this, there exists a standard, a common language to determine quality. These are all difficult questions to ask, let alone answer. The existence of a system is a good thing. However, when the system is only used to protect one group in the coffee value chain, it is a high time we relooked this system and, in the spirit of making coffee better, find ways of doing exactly that. Trading of all coffee as a commodity has a negative impact on human life, where demand dictates how expensive or cheap a coffee is, not its quality. Like local exchanges, there should be minimum prices incorporated into this process to make it just and fair and take consideration of producers' living expenses and production costs. Futures contracts based on speculation complicate it even further, making the price of coffee based on buyers' budgetary requirements and not actual farmer costs of production. Coffee here is used as a financial tool which adversely affects producers. Scoring coffee based on quality should not only be useful for informing the buyer about his potential purchase, but also for rewarding the seller for his potential sale. As coffee stakeholders, we all need to do our part in appreciating the origin of coffee and the real stories on the ground to be able to pay more to benefit the producer and not only the players at the retail end of the coffee value chain. It seems as though producers in some countries are still enslaved because they have little or no authority on what they earn for what they produce. Worse, that it is on their own land. Complex issue here because the producer governments that can put up systems in place to protect the producer also bow down to conditions and pressure from the buyers, and the farmer becomes the eventual loser. We have to be careful not to take what is truly rooted in racism and make it make sense, especially when there is a clearly racist system that we cannot ignore. We justify and insist that the sea market is a fair and righteous God in quotes. But how come it never rains down prosperity to those doing the hardest work? This system is oppressive to one group of people more than half of the time and does not compare to other systems for other high-value products. Roasting does not give coffee more value than growing it right does. What would roasters do without producers? There should be immense value given in growing it. It is not more difficult to roast than to produce, especially with all the variable factors of production. To make it more relatable, if the coffee that was grown in Santa Barbara, USA a couple of years ago could sell out in 2 weeks at the exorbitant prices it sold at and be marketed to sell for the rarity and limited nature of it in the US, surely the same audience should be given to excellent specialty quality coming from Africa and other non-US producers and rewarded commensurately, because this is human justice. To pose another question, would the solution to increasing the price of coffee to farmers be having more white farmers producing it? The coffee should reign superior, not the seller of the coffee or where it is grown in this case. Which leads me to another non-interesting observation. Conviviality in the coffee sector. May I draw your attention to another luxury product or beverage, wine, and other related products such as champagne. The traditional coffee producers have contributed to the sector for centuries, but have had little, if any, control of the prices they get. This is only common in commodities such as coffee and cocoa. If I compare this to wine production, which may also be considered a luxury product, majority of wine producers enjoy far more conviviality and some level of control and meaningful predictable gains from what they produce from their vineyards. That said, what are the typical growing areas? France, Spain, California in the US, Italy, and South Africa, with vineyards that are dominantly white-owned and run. In the Q-Grader courses that I teach, one of the sensory modules credits actual enjoyment to the appreciation of the beverage consumed. However, a pauperized coffee producer is unlikely to enjoy, let alone appreciate, what he or she produces if he or she is struggling to fend for basic needs, and so is more interested in selling everything he or she produces. It does not add up to produce a high-quality product, second most traded in the world, that makes the world go round, but live a low-quality life. Empowerment. Are you supporting local and indigenous-owned coffee businesses at origin? The barriers to entry into other high-value segments of the coffee industry are high for non-white stakeholders, and they need to be brought down. These take the form of economic as well as business relationship barriers. I will give you a short story. The first time I went into the Nairobi Coffee Exchange representing a Black, fully registered and competent woman-owned coffee dealership business, my own, to purchase coffee for export to one of my US clients, a representative of one of the long-time coffee-buying giant companies in Kenya, who was also at the auction, shocked me by asking me if in the coffee auction bidding setting, I was not afraid of people like him coming from companies like the one he was from. This statement from a white male having been hired from Europe to work for a dominating white-owned coffee company in Kenya indicated to me that there was a thread of privilege and entitlement that he had, even in our very own Kenyan coffee auction system, and that I, if nothing else, was supposed to be very intimidated. By extension, Buyer companies are afraid of letting go of sameness, even when it comes to trade, and will look to purchase coffee from traders who look like them. At this point, if you have noticed, the issue has long shifted from the good old fresh coffee and its attributes to the attributes of the person and the company selling the coffee. Coffee buyers can empower local communities by not only accepting their green coffee samples during coffee fairs, but by reverting to them with feedback and/or negotiating a sale, especially if the other parameters or criteria on the coffee have been met. The beauty with the producer end of the coffee value chain is that tokenism does not and should not really apply. The coffee is either specialty or non-specialty, regardless of who is selling it. Our struggle here is different. It is to be acknowledged as being equally, if not more capable of handling the entire value chain. Because truth be told, we have access to the entire value chain. There should be no control of participation and derived value by buyers when producers actually own the product. Yes, roasting does increase the value of coffee, but what would roasters do without producers? On the flip side, empowered producers can still do a lot as roasters. Producers can roast, but roasters cannot always produce. Therefore, there should be more value attached to growing coffee. If buyers could apply blind purchasing approaches to coffee by using quality parameters and facts that relate to the intrinsic quality of the coffee and not the company or person selling the coffee, we could see more elevation of producers and locally owned business at Coffee Origins. Here's another interesting experience I had at a cocktail somewhere in a coffee fair in Europe a few years back. A white lady coffee buyer and friend of mine learned that I had just set up the first certified SCA Premier Training Campus in Kenya and was a certified instructor conducting both CQI and SCA training courses for the region and the world. She pulled me aside and asked me if I owned the business by myself, and if so, how I did it, or had I partnered with an international company or foreign investor. I chose to take this as a compliment. For multinationals and private companies with subsidiaries at origin, train and mentor indigenous coffee professionals into leadership positions. Thank you for those who have trusted and believed in us to take you and your staff to higher levels of coffee knowledge and understanding. We need to see more empowerment through knowledge, because the expertise to grow your global business is available and capable at Coffee Origin to deliver the same consignments of coffee right at your customer's doorstep. Allow me at this juncture to ask a racist question. What is the world's best coffee? I'm sure many of you have been asked this question time and time again. Every producer believes their coffee is the best. Having run national cupping competitions in 10 African producing countries for years, I can attest to the uniqueness and beauty of winning coffees from each and every country. And just like a beauty contest or a muscle contest, any country can win if judges can learn to appreciate the differences that the world has to offer. As business leaders, and preference aside, showcase all you can to grow the appreciation of coffees from around the world. We need to push back on narratives that the best coffee in the world is a certain coffee, especially when power brokers are highly invested in it. Let us find ways to promote all genuinely winning coffees from the world every year. Pictures. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but actually, a picture should be worth $1,000. In the West, one needs to seek approval to not only take a picture with someone, but also to share the picture, and they are expected to tag those in the picture. The impossibility to get any of these things done at origin should be the indicator of breach of privacy. I would implore buyers from around the world to seek the necessary permission to take and share pictures of coffee producers, their families and living conditions in their communities before they do, either from them individually or from the local cooperative leadership. It might increase the retail value of your business, but it is unjust if it does not deliver the same value to the producer. And even if you bought the coffee, you do not own the rights of the people in the pictures. Strive to affect the business community in a positive way, and respect for privacy is one of those ways. The World Coffee Events has the ability to unite young coffee professionals from around the world. It is already established and renowned for helping grow the retail end of the coffee value chain in the short time it has been in existence. Speaking as a former World Barista Championship judge between 2009 and 2011, how difficult was it to include Black judges, especially from Africa and other producing countries? Judges' certifications have only ever happened in Africa twice since the WBC was set up almost 2 decades ago. Yet since 2004, Africa has sent national champions to this exciting event. In one of the years, 7 out of the 52 participants were from Africa. Judge certification should be a fair, transparent, accessible process rotating in all regions around the world if we are to pull everyone up and be at par. It's not fair to have a winning coffee from countries where the youth cannot participate or excel. Does this affect the statistics of performance in all these events? I leave that up to you to be the judge. I will finish with yet another quote. I can't change history. I don't want to change history. I can only change the future. I'm working on that. It's by Boris Becker. Thank you.